All right, Quentin. This is episode 15 of the Nervous System Training Podcast. Everyone watching, like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate it very much. All right, so today we're going to go over something we've gone over similarly in the past, which is Achilles injuries in the NBA. It's a growing trend. It just happened again a few days ago, Game 7 of the NBA Finals with Tyrese Halliburton. So we're going to dive into that, talk about why this concerning trend might be happening in the NBA, and what NBA players can do about it, what trainers can do about it with their athletes. Then we'll go into some of the old school UFC guys, Matt Hughes, Sean Shirk, Forrest Griffin, talk about some of their training techniques in their training camps and dive into that. But let's dive in here with Tyrese.
Yeah. Now, do we have footage of this going down?
Yeah, pulling it up here.
So what do I don't know much about this basketball player right now. Do you follow him closely? You've been watching the NBA lately?
Yeah, I'm an NBA fan. He's a younger guard, but he's coming to his own over the last few years. Old school point guard. He distributes the ball really well, but he's also pretty twitchy, good shooter, just all around good teammate. Led his team in the NF. I think they were like a 50-win team, so solid season, but they weren't really in the title conversation. And then they made it all the way there, kind of with him leading the way. So he's on a run leading up to this moment, but let's see what happens.
Can you make the screen larger for me? There you go. So was he in the one with the pink shoes and the leggings?
Yeah, exactly. He's at the
Okay.
top. There it is.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that drop step back. He just no mercy, no whistle. Just take the ball and score while he's on the ground.
Pretty
Oh man.
devastating. And so he'd been experiencing calf tightness, calf soreness, calf strain. I'd seen him kind of massaging the front of his shin. I thought there might have been some shin splints that was leading up to this. Ugh, it's hard to see. So yeah, leading up to this, there had been some. There you can see the pop. It's hard to see these, but I do think
Yeah.
you gotta understand what's going on if we're gonna do anything about it. So it's important.
Yeah. Okay. So there's okay. Everyone's crowding around. It's like a tradition now.
Yeah.
There's almost like a team protocol for when this happens to people.
Yeah, it's crazy. Everyone knew exactly what happened. Everyone on the court, everyone in the stands, everyone knows he's got a torn Achilles. Everyone has seen it enough times. Everyone knows he had the symptoms leading in.
He even knows it too. He even
Yep,
it's almost like you're in war and you're just waiting to get shot.
yep.
Like your number just pulls up. Okay, so but this is the reoccurring one. We're not seeing a lot of ACL tears. We're not seeing a lot of anything out, but this Achilles rupture is the commonality, correct?
Yeah. There are other injuries, but the Achilles are the ones that have been on a continued upward trend. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to double check. I'm pretty sure it's been 9 Achilles injuries this year, all non-contact, and 3 just in the playoffs. We had Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, and Tyrese Halliburton now, all one of the best players, if not the best player on their team in the middle of a playoff run, go down with the same injury.
Yeah, man, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of freaking money. That's some huge talent that's kind of is getting flushed down the drain right now.
Yep.
Well, okay, so we talked about this in the past, and I did hear something interesting. I've been seeing a couple coaches talk about this, and there was these two strength coaches that are doing a podcast, and they were saying like if anyone makes content based on an injured athlete, like you're a piece of shit. It's like you're trying to claim that your training system, if they did your training system, this wouldn't have happened. And I was kind of looking at it, I was like, yeah, I see a point. I see a point that those guys have. But at the same time, they also don't have any evidence that these alternate training systems could prevent a lot of these things. A lot of them are kind of under the lens that the current strength and conditioning model is the only way it should be done, no exceptions. So when when I heard about this, like Brian McGinty did a video on it, which gave his 2 cents. I thought it was really interesting, really good perspective. A couple other guys, and I was kind of thinking about this for a little bit. And so here's an insight that I'll kind of share with some people, and kind of create a better context of reality when it comes to professional athletes. Now, I'm working with three professionals right now, and I don't want to like disclose the things that we talk about. I don't want people to kind of track it back. So I'm going to say all these guys are professional cricket players. All right, I don't want to, for out of respect of our personal conversations, but they're professional American cricket players. I'll let the audience kind of like this, figure out what kind of pros they are. And here's a really shocking thing, Jake. Check this out. So if you, let's say, oh God, I'm trying to find a way to say this correctly without like, putting anyone on blast. So let's say you make it into, let's go with the MLB because you're a big baseball fan. Let's say you make it to the MLB, right, Jacob?
Hmm.
You go through the college system and you're in the MLB. What do you expect? Like, what do you think? What do you think these athletes? What kind of resources do you think these athletes get access to once they're in like the National Hockey League, the Major League Baseball, the National Basketball Association? Tell me, like, what do you think? What kind of resources, specialists, and treatment do you think these guys are getting?
Yeah, man. I think from the outside, the perception is they have pretty much unlimited resources. They've got the whatever trainers they want, whatever facilities they want. They got access to all that by the team, by their own bank accounts. Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah, you think that as soon as they walk in, they got like a team of scientists that are ready to just like put their body through diagnostics and MRIs and the latest and greatest state of the art technology, right?
Yeah, yeah. They go into the Wolverine chamber. They get the metal
The
bones.
aluminium pumped into their skeleton.
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
all that.
yeah. That's what I used to think too. I used to think like this is the NBA. Like this is where dreams happen. This is like we have unlimited resources. We're state of the art. We're the best of the best. And I even saw this one guy who's like trying to become a basketball player. He's really popular on Instagram. He's really big into Soviet plyometrics, and he was kind of talking about like how much their trainers, their physical therapists, their specialists get paid, and then looking at the athletes, it's like, hey, why are they getting paid so much when the results that are coming out are not matching their pay grade, right? As I've been talking to more and more professional athletes, and I've been having more conversations with them and getting some insight, it turns out they don't really have shit to work with. All right, let me explain. Is that when you're thinking about the NBA, what you see, right? We're looking at the screen right now. The floors polished to a mere sheen. The paint is fresh. Everything is state of the art. The shoes look great. The jerseys are nice and clean for every game. They literally have a brand new jersey. They make a new shoe for them per game. Like we think everything is like as fresh and as mint as possible. But you got to understand why things are like that. It's because they're trying to sell basketball. They're not trying to produce basketball. Right? This is a professional league. They're not in the business of developing anyone. They're in the business of selling tickets. So everything you see when it comes to these professional sports, the stadiums, the merchandise, the players, the large contracts, all of that is to create marketing hype to sell tickets. Because if you don't have that, you have no business. You start going into the negative. So when you're a professional athlete, you actually have less resources than if you were, say, a college athlete. Because one thing about the college institutions, at least they do dedicate a lot of resources. They have some research that goes into this. There's more that they put into the development of an athlete because of where they're at in their life cycle between the age of 18 and 22. Those are your prime years to develop someone. Now, not everyone goes to that system. Like I think, wasn't LeBron James the last guy to go from high school into the NBA? Like, and before they went away with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was the last year that they did that.
Right. So when it comes to professional sports leagues, the MLB, the NHL, the NFL, they're not concerned with developing anyone. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, developing a good athlete. Why would you dedicate millions of dollars into resources and specialists to develop a guy that you could trade next season, or he could be injured, or he could just honestly just like just exit his contract and play for another team? You know, that's a big liability if you're trying to run a business, right? These are businesses. Like colleges, as much as they say they're not a business, they are a business as well, but they have a little bit more of an incentive to develop these guys because scholarship programs. They have to get a return on their investment somehow. And so with these, when I'm talking to these professionals, it turns out that a lot of the methodology, a lot of the conditioning programs, a lot of the training cycles that they go through are seriously outdated. They do not have a team of experts that are putting like like electrical sensors on their muscles to figure out where their tissue is at. They don't have cryotherapy chambers, like stacked up ready to put bodies in so they got the best recovery. All that stuff that we kind of fantasize and think that they have access to, they don't. That's the shocking part. A lot of these guys are left to their own devices and have to pay out of their own pocket for help. Most of them see private contractors, especially during the off season. And I was working this other professional athlete. He rolled his ankle. It was during a game, televised on TV. If you like, you could see it. And he rolled his ankle pretty bad. And so he did not get the proper help he needed out of like the sports trainer because you got so many guys. There's only so many trainers. And he was telling me a lot of these techniques and a lot of these ideas they used were like from the 90s. So he had to pay out of his own pocket. He had to fly his own physical therapist in to help him rehab his ankle because he wasn't getting enough attention. And he's in one of those national leagues, a big one, right? Like huge. Like even though I'm saying he's a cricket player, he's definitely not a cricket player. So that's just one example of what these guys are really going through. So everyone thinks like, oh, how could this be happening? They're in the NBA. They have the best of the best training, the best of the best resources, the best recovery system. No, they don't. That's an illusion. It looks super expensive because because this is the product we're seeing. This is all we see. We don't see what happens when they go back into the tunnel. That information is not meant for us. And you also got to think when you're in season, right? You only have so many resources. You only have so many hours to work with these guys. Not all like some of the guys I'm working with in these high level organizations. There's no athletic assessments being done on them. There's no testing. There's none of that. Like they're left to their own devices. It's up to them to go seek help from one of the trainers or one of their resources if they need some sort of therapy, some sort of strength and conditioning. And to be totally honest, they're given a general plan. This one guy I was working with, one of these major organizations, he was telling me that they had one training program for all their specialists, for all of their cricket throwers, right? you know, and he was telling me he's like, well, how like if I'm, if I have a different body type, if I have a different, I'm a different height, I'm at a different age than some of these other guys. Why am I doing the same program as them? Like, how come I'm not doing anything individualized? Because they don't offer it. They don't offer these individual programs. There's not a specialist per athlete because that's not what their business is. That's not what they prioritize. They prioritize ticket sales, jersey sales, and not even winning championships. Another thing one of them told me is that a lot of these teams, they don't try to create a situation or a roster to win games, to win championships, because then everyone who's on that team, they have the ability to raise their market price. They can renegotiate contracts. They have more leverage on trading. That's why they got rid of the Bulls after the sixth championship, because the team became too expensive. They couldn't pay for it. It would bankrupt the Chicago Bulls. So they had to disband it. So you got to remember, it's a business first. Then it works with athletes second. And if one of these athletes get hurt, what do you think they're going to do? Jake? Like, if you lose an athlete like this, like, what would you do if you ran the National Basketball Association?
Just get another one.
Get another one. We got guys lined up out the door. We got G leagues, we got WNBA practice squad guys. Like, they have like bodies that they can sift through the deck of cards, and you just replace it. It's cheaper,
Yeah.
than trying to reinvest in a new athlete. Now, I don't know if the NBA pays for these surgeries or if their injuries are insured. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Like, I don't know, have enough information about that. But the point that I'm trying to drive home is that these guys do not have the latest and greatest training resources and specialists working with them on a day-to-day basis. If you look at a lot of their Instagram accounts, a lot of what they're doing, their strength and conditioning, the performance training, it's done at some like local gym or some strength and conditioning coach, in their local city.
Hmm.
It's not being done by the NBA.
Yeah.
So that's one factor. Did you have any thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah, I'll build off of that a little bit since I've been thinking about it too, and I think part of it is like these guys make so much money. I don't know Tyrese's contract, and by the way, they are insured for injury. At least the big
Okay,
contracts are at least to a different percentage. So just
that's nice.
to throw that in. But yeah, the cash is it doesn't change the salary cap situation. So it does affect, like, you can't just go buy another $40 million player when your $40 million guy goes down necessarily, but you get the money back to an extent. But yeah, I think that the more money these guys make, the scarier it is to work with them, and the scarier it is to push them to their limits as a trainer because the
Yep.
liability is huge. Like, I I have liability insurance as a trainer, and I don't even remember what I'm insured for, but I'm pretty sure it's $1 or $1.5 million. But if I'm working with a guy who makes $20 million, like, I don't even know what happens. Like, if I do something and they get injured, like,
Hmm.
so, like, there's just that factor, and if they're not getting pushed like to their limits in the practice, then what's going to happen is they're going to be like kind of reaching the intensity peaks during games, at least on their joints. And I think that's another reason you'd see these injuries is the the fear of pushing them, potentially injuring them in practice, is a reason they're not going to get those reps until everything's on the line.
Yeah, or maybe until their insurance coverage kicks in. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. But
like,
it's with a lot of sports, like, you can train to a higher intensity in practice. Like, you see, you got like a lot of UFC guys. I think in fighting it's a little more common. Like, you see guys go totally crazy in the training, where in the cage, like, that might be their off week. Like, there's guys, and maybe they get a little beat up, but like that Saturday, that training week, that's their break week. And then they go back to running a million miles a day, getting hit all the time in practice.
mhm. Yeah. So to me, this is what you're seeing with the NBA. It looks like something similar that the NFL has kind of gone through and is currently in right now, where this looks like a system failure from the top down. And it's not just one. It's not just strength and conditioning. It's not just weightlifting is bad and it sets you up for injury. That is a part of it. But there are also plenty of guys who do like your Western style strength and conditioning who are not getting these kind of injuries. So you can't just blame it on training protocol alone. Nothing is that simple. Things are very complex. So I think this is a layered problem where, one, I do believe the training protocols and some of the benefits that these guys are getting, is not adequate. Like, we've ran this subject into the ground where Western training methodology is very outdated. It's very slow to update. And on top of this, actually, what you brought up, that these athletes are worth so much money, they're so expensive. Maybe not a lot of guys or even themselves want to do anything that doesn't feel safe and familiar. They don't want to go into the realms of experimental training methodology, right? Like, they like, a lot of them have gotten this far without doing that much strength and conditioning. These athletes are not like in the weight room, in the performance gym as often as a lot of people think. A lot of these guys are, well, one, they're genetic freaks, so that takes them a long way. I mean, if you look at someone like Allen Iverson, never trained, never did anything outside of playing basketball. He's so dominant. So there's these guys that are out there, and the NBA is full of these guys. I call them neurophysical dominant athletes, where their nervous systems are so far beyond the average person that they could literally just do their sport and still be successful. They'll still jump higher, run faster than most professionals or even college athletes. So you have that factor. So then on top of that, there's also the game has changed. Defensive plays and defensive strategy has seriously gone down. Everyone is flopping, and flopping gets rewarded. So you can hunt for free throws, and the 3 point shot, that little statistical algorithm that people are trying to work, thanks to who's that one guy with a beard that made it real popular?
James Harden.
Yeah, James Harden. He really showed that. I think he made what he did. He win a championship off that strategy, or got pretty close.
No, honestly, he's famous for not doing well in the playoffs, but having spectacular regular seasons, like leading
Okay,
the league in points by a wide margin, and all the efficiency ratings. But then, and the reason is in the playoffs, there's a little more physicality allowed.
right. So he kind of opened the gap and made that popular, that you can just work this 3 point system, and if you throw 100 threes, if you can keep a percentage of like 60, you're going to score X amount of points every single game. You're going to live and die on the arc. So that's also a factor. So guys are allowed to make less contact with each other for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. I think it's to make the pace of the game. Oh no, actually, I do remember. It's so the scoring system is higher. So you got more points, you got more shots, you have the potential to sell more exciting basketball. That's how they were kind of looking at this. And I'm not sure exactly why I didn't look into it enough, but I wonder if there's some sort of data that we could look at on the correlation between higher scoring points and ticket sales or jersey sales or something along those lines. Like if you look at Caitlin Clark, she's a perfect example of how someone who can put a lot of points on the board can drive a lot of money, can funnel a lot of money into an organization. So maybe they're just trying to duplicate that, kind of like what the UFC apparently is trying to do with Sean O'Malley, where they're trying to make a Conor McGregor clone. Hey, you find a guy who's very eccentric, he's got good knockout power. Let's put the camera on him as often as possible. Let's line him up with fights that the potential for this matchup for him to win, maybe higher, or even for him to lose. Like you try to create situations to sell more tickets, right? So I think with all these things kind of combined, not having great resources, the speed of the game changing. Like since you can't work your defense, you can't make contact with anyone. That means offense has to double its speed, double its movements, double its contacts on the court. That, and I think here's another factor. I wonder about these basketball shoes as well. I wonder if the design of these basketball shoes could be playing a detrimental role to these guys' physical health. I'm not sure. I haven't worn a pair of basketball shoes lately. Have you?
They're pretty rough. There's huge the drop, the heel to toe drop is big. The stack, that's the height of the foam, like at the bottom of the drop, is huge, and the toe box is narrow. So when it comes to solid shoes, I mean, I'm a big prescriber of barefoot shoes, and they have wide toe box, low stack, and zero drop. So they're pretty much the exact opposite of what I believe are the best shoes for your feet. And there's a couple companies now that are making more minimalist shoes, but yeah, I'd say they put you in a pretty big injury risk. It takes away your toe activation. There's a lot of foam. It takes away your feel. And since there's that high stack, like if you land on someone's foot, it's a greater collapse, So you see a lot
Right.
of ankle injuries because it's just like you're falling. It's the same thing if you fall off a taller plyo box, it's going to be more
Right.
impact on
It's
the
like
fall.
tripping
Just
on a high heel.
yeah, exactly. So I did see one post after the Tyrese injury that was saying like I forget the number, so I can't quote it exactly, but it was talking about back in the days when there was Converse, which have zero drop and low stack. There were zero or whatever the Achilles injuries per year. Now there's however many per year. So
Mm.
I don't know how much of it's the shoes, how much of it's the training, the money. There's a lot going into it, but yeah, the
Yeah.
shoes definitely play a role.
Yeah. So, like I said, this is several problems compounding on top of itself. So I think the shoes play a big factor. Actually, I'm thinking about buying a pair of basketball shoes. I'm going to have you recommend me a pair just so I can wear them and just run around them and see what they feel like. I was looking at some on the internet. a lot of them look like shit. Like they look like terrible. Like I imagine my feet and I'm like, dude, these look freaking awful. I got to run around these stupid things.
Yeah.
But the shoes I think are definitely playing a factor. It sounds like they're very they can easily weaken the feet and disrupt neurological connection. And that has a direct correlation with how your Achilles tendon and your gastrocnemius respond to loading, respond to kinetic forces impacting it. On top of these guys are paid a lot of money, so resources might be limited, or on top of that, there could be a trust factor. Like if I had $18 million contract, I would be very cautious on who I work with because you don't want to jeopardize, your money. Like you just made it to the NBA, you got zeros in your bank account. You buy a house for your mom. You got to pay for hose. You got a hot tub. You're trying to, you got all these. You got a Lambo that you got to crash because you took drugs. Like you got all these liabilities like in your life now, and you're going to trust some guy who's got different or alternative training methodologies to help you get better for this upcoming season. Like, no, they're probably not going to feel comfortable risking that. It's too much on the line, so they're going to stick with what they know, or they're going to work with trainers that have worked with NBA players before, and maybe they just do something very basic, maybe something a little bit more generalized, something that's not going to jeopardize their own personal business. Like, let's say you accidentally hurt one of these basketball players, or you overtrain them or something like that. They develop like a tendonitis in the knee. You know, this basketball player could sue you. He shut your whole life down, right?
Yeah.
So you got all these factors compounding on top of itself, on top of professional sports leagues that are not designed to have the state of the art equipment, best trainers in the world, best trainers money can buy. No, they're not built for that. They're built to sell tickets. They're built to have the best stadiums money can buy. They're built to have the best computer graphics on their jumbotron. They're built that's what they're there for. They're to sell jerseys. That's their main goal. It's not to develop athletes. So you have all these factors that are compounding. Lack of defense, speed of the game is so much faster. Contacts are improving. These athletes are getting stronger, so they're generating more force. Shitty shoes, and now you're kind of in this crazy cycle where the game is literally eating itself. It's literally eating its own players. It's unsustainable. It's hitting the point of diminishing return. And the NFL is going through this exact same process as well. Non-contact injuries in the NFL have been through the roof for years. And this is the sad part, is that the NBA is probably, instead of acknowledging the issue, what they're going to do is they're just going to culturally adapt. Right? So instead of acknowledging the issue, like, hey, we have a problem. How do we fix this problem? How do we make things better for the players? What they're going to do is like, okay, we got to raise our insurance prices. We got to hire more surgeons. The MLB is going through this exact same problem itself. Well, we got to hire more surgeons to run Tommy John surgeries. We got to hire more specialists. We got to make sure that we have a roster of 6, 8 guys deep because we're going to lose 5. We're going to lose 5, this season, and we got to quickly replace them and make sure our ass is covered by insurance. And then and then give it enough time, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, all of a sudden it becomes normal. And people are like, yeah, shit goes wrong in basketball. You tear your Achilles tendon. Just like how we don't bat an eye when a guy blows his knee out in football. That never used to happen in the 80s. It never used to happen in the 90s. Somewhere in the 2000s, ACLs started flying off like freaking hotcakes. And now it's been happening for so long, we kind of just accept it as normal. That's the sad part. And I think the NBA is going to go through the exact same issue. The MLB is going through that right now with their pitchers. UCLs are just flying off the shelves. Kids are opting into Tommy John surgeries before they're out of high school.
I know preventative surgery is wild.
Yeah. And it's a wild surgery too. Like they're basically synthetically reinforcing their UCL with like fiber optic wiring or whatever the hell, like these crazy like knotted material. And a lot of that is because velocity programs. Everyone wants to hire. We're in the era of we're not in the juice era anymore of home runs. We're in the era of, well, who knows if it's juice still, could be. We're in the era of 97-mile-per-hour fastballs. And you got pitchers blowing their arm out like crazy, trying to keep these velos up.
Yeah. What do you think that let's what do you think it is with the UCL? Since part of the theory that I've heard on that is that it has to do with the analytics, and I don't know. This is just something I've heard that the more they understand spin rate, the more they understand the mechanics that lead to high velocity. They're optimizing these little details, and in doing so, they're pushing the human body further and further to the limit on average with these pitchers. And so then you get it to the point where at a higher frequency they're exceeding the limit and breaking down.
Hmm.
So do you think it's possible that people are just getting like too good at sports, like too explosive, too that they're getting too good at exerting force that the body just can't handle it? Or do you think that do you think that they're just not approaching the training right to compensate for the added force production to support that higher threshold?
Yeah. Okay, so here, this is yeah, this is it's almost like the exact same situation, but just a different technique. So when I was working with baseball players, like I was mostly working like they wanted me to improve like hitting. You know, that was kind of like my thing was like hitting. And when it came to like throwing velocity, the team that I worked with, we were not big into like high velocity camps, or what's that one baseball company that their whole marketing strategy is to get you to like 90 plus miles per hour. They're really big
Yeah,
in
I forget what it's called. I know what you're talking about though.
they sell like those weighted balls that you throw backwards.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't yeah, I
it's,
can't remember the name. They're real popular in the baseball community.
yeah.
But when we were working with our pitchers, that we developed a strategy, and a lot of it was when I was doing research, that there's a direct correlation with the rise in velocity camps and velocity programs and these Tommy John surgeries. They went up in a parallel throughout the 2000s and 2010s. So I think when baseball started to clean itself up after the whole steroid era, that we weren't able to hit balls out of the park as easily. So they needed something. There was a new we need a new answer for baseball. Like, what's a new advantage we can take? And was there a pitcher that kind of really made this idea popular? Was it like Justin Verlander or someone who really kind of showcased how a 97 or 102 mile per hour fastball could win you games?
Um, I think it'd be Nolan Ryan was really the first flamethrower that I know of, and then it kind of became more ubiquitous in like in the modern day. Like at the time, he was an outlier. He was like one of the only guys that can hit 100, but like just in this one video, we've already seen 10 different guys hitting 100. There's some guys who average 100 on their fastballs.
Right.
So yeah, Alroydis Chapman. He's a reliever. He was the first guy. He was a closer for the Reds when he first came up, but he was the first guy who was like hitting 100 every single game that I remember. He would max out at like 104 or 105. And he still throws it hard, but he's older now. He's in his mid 30s at least.
Yeah. So somewhere along the lines, these started popping up. Where and probably it was winning. When you talk about the analytics, like there's a lot of these, guys in these sports organizations who literally study the stats to try to figure out what wins the most games, what sells the most tickets, what correlates to that. They definitely are data tracking up the ass to try to maximize the profitability of their sport. And so velocities probably increased because exit velo probably decreased now that they had to ban the use of steroids. Oh, we got caught. Okay, so it's like, hey, velocity, that's something that's winning. So maybe it organically shifted into something they could control. So when you're training for velocity, you're really maxing out the arm. And a lot of the training methodologies to improve your velocity have to do with a lot of input or output, like throwing against resistance bands, throwing like weighted balls. Like, how can we improve the output of the athlete? And a lot of guys were getting shoulder blade issues, were getting elbow issues. And when they had me like see like, hey, what can we do to reduce the strain on our pitchers? I said, oh, well, we gotta get more input into the body. We got to do things backwards. We got to have them like absorb and release things like more medicine ball throws, things that are going to help absorb kinetic energy and release kinetic energy instead of just outputting kinetic energy, because that creates a huge imbalance within the body. And we also believe like, hey, if someone has a fastball, great, but at the end of the day, like, our goal should be executing pitches, not just throwing fastballs, and the occasional changeup. So we focus more on our skill set on pitches, how well we can manipulate the ball, how well can the catcher and pitcher relationship, can we start seeing things, about hitters. And then all of a sudden our throwing injuries started to decrease. Like it just immediately, all the problems started to decrease when we started fixing the shoulder blades. And a lot of this UCL stuff comes from when a pitcher can't get their elbow above their shoulder, when it drops too low, the kinetic, like, because when this lifts up, your pectoral minor really kicks in, and this really takes a lot of that shearing force. Yeah. And it really goes through here, and it goes into the bicep, and it leaves the finger. When your elbow drops below the shoulder, the pectoral minor becomes less active, and when you throw, majority of the kinetic energy doesn't hit the bicep, it goes right into the UCL and then through the forearm. So I would start, watching guys in slow motion, watching their pitching, and we would just do things to kind of like open up their shoulder blades, improve like their shoulder retraction, because that helps get their arm up, improve these mechanics. Now, we couldn't get every guy to do it. There's still some kids that just did not have those range of motion. They didn't want to put in the time. Elbows would hurt. What are you going to do? So, yeah, I think a lot of it is. Oh, and another factor is what's it called? Performance capacity. These days, in every single sport except football, every single sport, these kids are playing double, triple the amount of games all year long. Like there's this one softball player that I was working with. She ended up going to Notre Dame, on a full ride scholarship. She was like a badass softball pitcher, and she would literally play games as a pitcher all year long. All year long. Like she never was shut down. And I had a conversation with her where I was telling her, I'm like, listen, like your elbow is bothering you. Like you're icing it every day. It hurts all the time. Like you don't, like, your high school season is over. Like you're going to go to Notre Dame. Take the next 3 months off. Do nothing throughout the summer. Work on your physicality. Work on your leg strength. Work on other things, like stop throwing. She's like, well, I have a travel team that wants me to go to Florida this weekend to help them, with this upcoming game. I'm like, why? Like, why are you playing more? You're already in Notre Dame. Your high school season just ended. You made the state finals. We didn't win, but you made it to the finals. Shut it down, right? Just shut it down. You're done. But she felt compelled to help these coaches that she's known since she was a little girl. And these coaches will take advantage of a lot of these athletes, because these coaches don't give a shit what happens to these athletes. They just want to use them to win games so they can raise the profitability and the marketability of their organizations, so they can charge, instead of $5,000 per season, they can charge $5,500 because now they have a national title. Now they can sell more games. Like a lot of these travel leagues are not interested in developing athletes. They're interested in getting people to pay to play on their team. More tournaments. Every time you play a tournament, every kid has to pay X amount of dollars. These organizations, like these travel baseball teams, they make more money now. At the expense of these athletes. And a lot of these athletes feel pressured. They feel obligated to put their body through more stress, more training, more games for nothing. And guess what happened? Her first season at Notre Dame?
She injured.
Totally blew her elbow out. Had to get surgery. Never pitched the same. Yeah. And I've seen this happen all the time. Basketball players, their knees are bothering them. They're developing jumper's knee. They're getting tendonitis in their ankle. They're getting tendonitis in their feet. They're having shoulder issues. Hey, we've got 3 months till the season. Like, shut it down. She's like, oh, I got travel basketball, though. I have to keep playing basketball. I'm going to get worse. I'm like, no, you're not. Like a lot of these kids think they have to be playing all the time, and a lot of these parents also believe they have to be playing all the time. It's the only way you get good at your sport, and that's a total myth. And a lot of these kids are just getting run into the ground. They're just getting run into the ground with playing the same sport week after week, month after month, for year after year, with almost little time to diversify with their bodies. And so you get repetitive patterns, you get repetitive actions. Nothing breaks down an athlete more than having them do the same thing over and over again. And that's another factor we can throw in with this NBA. Now, where did these guys come from? How many games did they play that they didn't need to have played?
Yeah, they played a ton of games. Like the whole AAU culture is pretty wild.
Dude, I hate it. I hate the whole AAU system. I really do. They're responsible for more dreams being destroyed from overplaying athletes than any other organization. Like a lot of these kids, like it's so crazy because you don't really think about how many kids. All we focus on are the kids that do make it. Oh, he made it to Michigan. He made it to Michigan State. Now he's in the NBA. For every person that makes it to a high level, like a Division I college or a professional organization, there's probably 1,000 kids that didn't, that were just as good, that were just as genetically talented, just as hardworking. But because they played too many games, they never took enough rest time, they didn't deload their bodies properly, they developed injuries. They developed injuries, they got burned out, their bodies couldn't keep up, and they never got selected.
Yeah, I think that's survivorship bias, where the the tales of the people who make it get credited as what it takes to be successful, but you don't see all the people who tried those same techniques and failed along the way.
Mm-hmm. That's a real quick. That's a key difference between our country, the United States, and how we approach sports in other countries. Because when you're Germany, when you're like Spain or the UK, like you're literally the size of Texas. Like Michigan is bigger than most countries in Europe, right? So they don't have that many bodies. That means every body counts. So they put more effort into trying to develop and not leaving that many kids behind because they need to out of necessity. In the United States, dude, we got freaking bodies we can just go through. We treat athletes like they're disposable, because you can always just get another kid, and all you have to do is you don't really have to have that good of a system. You just got to wait for someone who's super genetically superior to rise to the top. Be like, yeah, we developed him. This is why we're the best. Look at who we produce. That's what these colleges do. Like these colleges aren't developing guys, not really. They're already working with the 1% of 1% of genetic athletes. There's already been a huge bottleneck for them to get through just to be there. So these guys probably would have been great no matter what. Maybe not the best. There's still a 1% that only makes the NFL, but so we gotta pump the brakes when we look at ourselves and say like, yeah, we're developing some of the top athletes like that, or we just have we have enough bodies to go through a crazy selection process where just the best rise to the top and we take all the credit for it.
And enough money to incentivize the people who rise to the top to stick around.
Yeah, yeah, because we gotta use this guy. We gotta sell tickets. We gotta sell this organization so we get the next 20 kids to sign up. So we maybe get one more prize winning horse.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's get into some more of the fight stuff. This is Matt Hughes training. For people who don't know, Matt Hughes, he was middleweight, right?
He's a welterweight. He was the first
Welterweight.
welterweight GOAT.
Okay, yeah, first welterweight goat. This was a little before I started watching, so I know he was the guy before GSP. The GSP kind of came in after him, as far as I know. But yeah, here's some of his training footage.
Yeah, so when we look at this, so I think this is Matt Hughes. Where now a couple of things about Matt Hughes. I made a post about him because if you look at his striking, like Jake, you're kind of new to the fight game, but would you spar that guy?
Yeah, based on that, yeah.
Based on like So I made this post talking about how like the difference between like striking quality with rigid tissue and elastic tissue, and so many guys got so mad at me. Like, why don't you fucking fight? I'm like, dude, yeah, I would fucking trade hands with the country boy, no problem. With wrestling, I don't know, man. He might pick me up and smash me,
Yeah.
but a pure boxing match, yeah, sure. Like I've sparred with guys that are way better than him. But you know, people have their biases. People don't, you don't want to insult their heroes. But here's kind of like a look at this is like 2002, 2004, somewhere at, like within that timeline. Now, I think he's at a local YMCA. He was doing some training footage, you know, trying to promote himself. This is like UFC like 73 or some shit. Like these are like old days back when they were just putting duct tape over the gloves. But what I wanted to kind of highlight looking at some of these old training systems is that if you go to your local MMA gym, you know, today, just pick any major city, you know, or any town, go to the local MMA gym. This is how a majority of them are doing it still. You know, they're doing skill work, which is fine. Skill work's great. See if we can go a little bit forward. See if we can kind of look at the strength and conditioning protocols just to kind of see what they were doing 20 years ago. And I want, if there's some fighters or some athletes that are looking at it now, you know, you can kind of realize how much this stuff is not getting updated. Yeah, and apparently Matt Hughes had a twin brother that never fought, but is built and looks exactly the same as him. Okay, here we go. So he's doing some, you know, some cable curls look like a Paula press or whatever it's called. He's doing some dumbbell presses. We're doing the whole. Remember doing this? I remember doing that when I was a teenager. I was like, yeah, this is gonna get me laid. You know, doing these movements, cable rows, you know, lat pulls with the cable, right? Now, if you look at this, like Jake, have you seen? Would you be shocked if you saw like your local professional fighter, you know, 2-0, 3-0 fighter, you know, doing this? This is what we see guys doing now.
Yeah, yeah, this is pretty standard stuff.
Pretty standard stuff. Now, when you look at something like the medical industry, right? When you look at how they did surgeries back in like 2002, do you think it's going to look the same as how they do surgeries now?
No, it's I'd imagine it's a whole different world.
Right. Things are going to improve. You know, we got ultrasounds. They have ultrasounds that hook up to their iPhones now. There's better equipment, like those like real robot hands that they use with those instruments to like get into really small areas that they can't. Like things get updated. Things like get like redeveloped. Technology improves. New methodology comes about. New ideas get try to create like a different result. I just want to show this in particular. Let's stick with like the MMA industry. The MMA industry, the evolution is so slow right now where we got guys literally doing the same workouts, the same fitness movements, the same type of training camps, and it's going on like 20 to 30 years and nothing's really changing. Now, has it gotten better at the very cream of the crop of MMA? Yes. I think when Dana White implemented the UFC Sports Institute, that did open the door for more updated methodology to be viewed and for coaches to learn it. And it has like a top down sort of process. You know, the highest guys at the top get the latest and greatest stuff. The guys in the middle, they observe it, they take it on, they try to learn it, they implement it. And then the guys below do the same thing. Like it's a top down structure, like a monarchy. But even still, like if you go to like your local gym, like you got to hire guys that know how to do this. And majority of these gyms that are trying to produce now, here's the thing: why I get on MMA industry so much more than these other sports. Well, one, because it's where I came from, and two, your job is to produce professionals. If you're an MMA coach, your job is to develop. That is your job. You are in the business of long-term investment on a guy. Unlike a University of Michigan, it's you got him for 4 years. Like who cares, right? Maybe you got him for two. He might quit. He might leave schools. Whatever. But if you're an MMA gym, this is your lifeblood. You need guys who are committed, dedicated, that you can develop. You can take them in off the street and turn them into a UFC fighter. In 5 to 6 years. That your gym literally runs on that sort of incentive. And so they have all the reason in the world to do the latest and greatest ideas, and I don't ever see it implemented. I don't ever see heart rate monitors being implemented at the gym. Guys are still lifting weights like they're at Planet Fitness. They're doing skill work. Now, I will say skill work innovation has improved. Mitt work ideas have improved. We learned from boxing coaches. People have come up with new ideas for jiu-jitsu. We've gotten more Muay Thai specialists. There's been more money funneled into places like Tiger Muay Thai. More knowledge has been spread for the skill set. But when it comes to performance and in competition, skill set is one thing. Skill set, you really want to focus on skill set as an amateur. When you get to the professional setting, you definitely want to build up your skill set. But when you're in fight camp, performance needs to be the dominant factor, because you're not going to have enough time or enough energy, and it's not a very great strategy to try to build as many skills when you have fight competition on the horizon. There's not enough time to put that pattern into your body. You want to take what you already know and you want to make it as sharp and efficient as possible and be able to execute those movements for as long as possible without getting tired. Because cardio is the number one factor that determines if you're going to win or lose, unless you have some God-given talent. You have the genetic ability to knock people out with one punch, but that is super rare. Like, you can't bank on that. It's not a reliable strategy. And even still, let's look at like Sean Shirk. Let's kind of take a look at how he's doing it. Now, Sean Shirk was like this guy was a strength and conditioning freaking addict. He was so addicted to training to the point where it actually shortened his career. And this is more like, this is a little bit more up to date. Now I think we're 4 years ahead of like where Matt Hughes is at. And, like, again, Jake, we're seeing, your functional strength training system, hitting the tire with hammers. This rope climb thing is actually kind of interesting. I haven't seen other gyms kind of incorporate this. This might be like
that. That's cool.
Yeah, his own sort of thing. Yeah, it's all right. Mess around with it. But if we keep going down the rabbit hole, now here's some interesting. Sean Shirk did use a heart rate monitor. Now, I will give Sean Shirk credit. He never did get tired in his fights. Not really. His biggest issue was he couldn't execute on techniques very well. Especially if he was working with someone who was a lot, like when we saw him against BJ Penn. And another part of it is because of how hard he pushed himself. When you're doing really high strength and conditioning protocols at a high intensity, if you're not deloading properly, if you're not periodizing your training camp properly, if you're just hitting circuit training after circuit training after circuit training, high intensity interval over and over and over again, you're going to overload your body, you're going to tear down your joints, and you're going to set yourself up for injury. You're never going to keep up. And that's actually what defeated Sean Shirk. Sean Shirk, he lost, not a lot of fights. He lost a couple fights. He got outclassed a couple times. But really what took him out of the fight game is that his body was just destroyed by the time he got to a position to start, fighting for the title. And here's another thing. He did get busted for a performance-enhancing drug, which, when you look at him, could he be on shit? Seems plausible. He looks sort of natural. He does kind of look really jacked, but at the same time, he's also very mesomorphic. He's really short. I might give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know. It was a different era. They weren't really testing shit back in those days. But the point I'm trying to make is that with these type of strength and conditioning protocols, without it being programmed properly, without someone understanding how to deload your body, and also trying to make you a better mover instead of just make you better at just doing workouts, because a lot of this stuff is he's just getting good workouts. It doesn't really seem like there's a point. I don't know if they're cardio testing him. I don't know if they're trying to keep his heart rate at a certain zone or anything along those lines. Maybe they are, or maybe they're just looking at the heart rate hoping it just goes up, because you also got to look. You need a coach who needs to understand what he's looking at. He needs to know which zone you're trying to hit, how where your heart rate needs to go back down. How do we get the spike back up? How much rest time in between? Sometimes a lot of these guys I have seen, at Michael Bisping's gym, I remember seeing this training camp where the coach, he just wanted everyone's heart rate to be at 190. For whatever, he's like, if your heart rate is not at 190, get out of the building. and he just hit the time and go, and everyone just had to try to hit 190 for like 5-minute rounds. So it makes no sense. It doesn't duplicate the energy system demand of the fight. Like, you're just like burning these guys out, and that's how you damage the body. You overtrain the body, you overfry the nervous system, and then you're useless the next 3 days. But yeah, this is what year is this? I'm thinking I think this is like 2005. This is the same stuff we're seeing today. There's thousands of guys all across the nation doing the exact same workouts.
Yeah.
Nothing's updated, nothing's progressing, nothing's innovating. We're in a dark age, just repeating over and over again.
Yeah.
So, and then yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, so what would it what like? Let's say things do innovate over the next decade or so. Like, what types of innovations do you see coming down the pike?
So there have been a couple outliers that have pushed innovation. Like Nick Kirsten is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Kirsten, Mark Marinovich, of course. Phil DeRue, he has a pretty solid cardio protocol that he's run his guys through, and it's gotten really good results. Like, he really took the time to understand proper cardiovascular training, how to periodize it in, how to hit the heart rate zones at the right time. So there's a reason why his athletes had really good gas tanks. Like, you got to give credit where credit's due. Now, his strength and conditioning protocol, I think, is very outdated still. He's still into like the powerlifting system, way of doing things, which is pretty, it's okay. It's not, I don't think it's the best, but he did make big improvements with Johanna Jędrzejczyk. He made some decent improvements with Dustin Poirier, and a couple other fighters. But he's also, I've heard from a lot of other fighters, he's very difficult to work with. So that's another factor. So for whatever reason, but that's more like his coaching style. So, but he's really brought some innovation there. I was going to say TJ Dillashaw's coach, I thought, was really trying to put in some serious effort into developing better cardiovascular programming until TJ Dillashaw just got popped for EPO, and that kind of discredited all his work because he hasn't been able to duplicate another kind of TJ Dillashaw. So he doesn't have, he kind of broke down his proof of concept. No one everyone that goes to that guy's system, TJ's the only outlier. And because he had a performance, I don't know if he was on it the whole time, but he was on it. So that's enough to kind of not do his system any favors.
Yeah.
But really, outside of that, that's really it when it comes to the top of my head. Like, yeah, I'm not really seeing it, out of like a lot of these coaches. I'm not seeing like huge innovation. I'm not seeing things that are really pushing the needle forward to make the sport and the way we approach the sport better. It's still a lot of the stuff we're seeing Forrest Griffin do. Bouncing on the tire, punching like their stomachs, hitting the tire with a sledgehammer, pushing the sled, the same stuff, circuit training over and over and over again, and that's all over the nation right now. Nothing is really precise. Nothing is very accurate. A part of it could be too that maybe there's not enough incentive for proper strength and conditioning programs. Maybe they don't make enough money. Maybe they can't put in this kind of research. Maybe they don't have the facility or the amount of guys that they're working with. They can't implement it properly. Mm-hmm. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, there's the UFC PI, which is cool, but then we get into those issues we talked about earlier, where what's their incentive, and they've got plenty of fighters. It's always just next man up with them.
Yeah,
but they have innovative facilities at least.
They have innovative facilities. They had Peloton bikes, which I thought was like, fuck. Like, what's the point of this? But and they have recovery tools. I would say the UFC PI is kind of what most people think all professional organizations have, like, at their fingertips. Mm-hmm. A lot of them don't.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't have those kind of resources. I think that's why Dana White set it up, because he wanted to appear as like a state of the art sort of sports league. But the problem is with those institutes, like, a lot of this comes down to like the skill of your coaches. Like, you can have all the best training equipment in the world, and if you don't have a coach that knows how to do things properly, like you're still going to get subpar results.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, look at Tom Aspinall. Like, here's a perfect example. Like, apparently, he's the best heavyweight to ever live. Apparently, you know, now that John Jones is retired, he's had multiple knee issues, and he's still not fixing his feet. Like, his problem is his feet, and there's no, even at the Performance Institute, there's no one in there that understands that his feet are kind of destroying his knees, and no one's doing anything about it. So you can have the shiniest mirrors, the most state of the art equipment. Everything looks nice and polished, looks great on camera. But if you don't have the knowledge behind it, then it's kind of pointless.
Yeah. Part of it, I think, is that like foot strength is hard to measure. Nutrition easy to measure, weightlifting easy to measure. All these types of things. Cardio, heart rate, easy to measure, and you could say the UFCPI has all that stuff down. But when it comes to the nervous system, it's very difficult to measure. It's a lot of the output of the training is quality rather than the quantity or the power of the movement. It's a lot of it's just like the timing, the touch. Um,
You can measure foot strength though. There are ways you can do it. You can quantify foot
yeah.
strength, but you can also manually just measure it. Like you can literally just grab someone's foot and have them like go into
Hmm.
extension as hard as you can and feel how strong it is.
Yeah.
You know, and you can like I
True.
promise you, if we did that with Tom Aspinall, like they would probably have some strength, but his toes would have no ability to drive. It would just like his toes would immediately shoot back and it would be like little baby toes.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen Brian McGinty do um, that assessment with the toes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That assessment is like that. That's where Marv like kind of like went into light speed with his training program. Like I've worked with some other coaches. I've talked to other coaches. I've paid for programs. I the, these assessments, like it's very rare that people have like a really refined assessment process for their athlete. A lot of these assessment processes come from corrective exercise from NASM. You know, overhead squat with a bar, single leg, which there is some value in that. But for performance, that's not enough information to really figure out how to do everything. And a lot of that philosophy comes from hips down or hips up measurements. Like what is going on from the body from the hips up through the torso or the hips down through the legs. We assess things from the big toe all the way up the chain. You know, foot strength, big toe strength, leg abduction, leg adduction, internal hip rotation on both legs, erector spinae development, shoulder blade development, serratus, where the serratus is at, can it slide properly, ranges of motion, shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, core strength, oblique strength, everything, every part of the body, grip strength, everything gets tested. You know, to find out where these weak points are, to find out where these people are not developing the proper amount of force. You know, and when you look at it, it's not like it's not a mind blowing assessment. It's not like you need a freaking computer. Like I remember when I worked at this rec center as a personal trainer, they invested like thousands of dollars into this ACE diagnostic like assessment system. It was like a computer that literally like had like this printer attached to it and like this cable you put. It was like this whole setup, you know. And when I was running through it, I'm like, fuck, like dude, we don't need all this. Like just like we can just manually test people with our hands to get like a more accurate, intuitive like idea what's going on with their body. But a lot of these assessment processes, like they're just their philosophy when it comes to approaching it, it's so attached to the fitness world, you know, that they're getting very, very limited understanding of what's going on with people's bodies. You know, as soon as I see an athletic assessment and the athlete is wearing shoes, I freaking just keep clicking. I was like, this is fucking terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're describing is more like a physical therapy assessment.
Yeah,
Physical
manual
therapy.
muscle testing. It's
Yeah.
yeah. When I show this to physical therapists, when I show these assessments and this training, they get it. Like I love working with physical therapists. They freaking love this training system because they have a deeper understanding of how the human body works, how these mechanics work. Like I've done a lot of foot strengthening seminars and workshops for physical therapy clinics, you know, showing them like, hey, these are areas where we can make improvements. These are things we can work on. These are different modalities you can apply for your own patients. And their minds are blown, because they're just never taught this. Now, if that could blow a physical therapist's mind who has an MD, who's a doctor, who has like over $240,000 in school loans, and that's been going to college for like 8 years. You take a 4-year CSCS coach, like no, they have no chance. They have no understanding. They have no idea what to look for because their model isn't designed to how you make the human body better. Their model is designed how can we create more power and more output into a body, in a very short amount of time. So they literally just don't know to look for it. They're never trained in there. You know, that's the limitations are. The part that sucks is when you try to introduce these ideas to a lot of these CSCS, these strength coaches, these power coaches, they immediately think it's bullshit and they think it's fucking nonsense because it wasn't in their textbook. That's the part that does suck. These coaches' identities and egos are so attached to training methodologies that are so outdated that they're not open to learn. They're not open to be scientists. They're not open to experiment. I would say that's a big red flag. If your strength coach looks like a power lifter, big red flag.
Yeah, it's. I think so too. They at least need to be open to exploring
Yeah,
less conventional
that's like
methods.
saying can you imagine if there was any other industry that was really like that? Can you imagine if there were like surgeons or doctors that were still doing things from like the 80s that weren't trying to like like they're still trying to like it'd be
Yeah.
terrible. Like this for some reason this industry can get away with it, but all these other industries, things get updated.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can do our part to update things
Yeah.
in a little way, at least. But yeah, that's some good stuff today. It's interesting to see that there's definitely you can see these trends are perpetuating all sports. Like we're talking about these patterns that are happening in every league, every sport. So it'd be
You know, I-
interesting to
I'll
keep
say
chipping away.
I'll say this because there are some pros that follow my account. Like if you watch this, if you listen to this, you're a professional athlete. Find a specialist and start experimenting. This stuff is not going to break your body. It's not going to ruin your life. As long as there's data, they're focusing on things like the feet, the fascial system, the neurological system, how they fire the muscles, generating more force. You know, like look for new training methods. You keep doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, you're just going to end up on the ESPN highlight reel with a blown out Achilles tendon. You're just going to be another body they're going to stack. These organizations, they're not interested in taking care of you. They're interested in selling you. And when you can't make money for them, they're done with you. This is what it is.
Yeah, and listen to your body. Like this stuff, it feels good. You'll know if you're actually going to injure yourself. I think a lot of trainers they watch it and they don't know what it feels like to be, an
Yeah.
athlete going through this stuff. So, like if you're pushing the limits. Obviously, don't go over the limit, but just listen to your body.
Yeah. Hope that guy makes it.
Yeah, the surgeries are getting better. That's the one. Um, like
Watch
we
the
said.
surgery. Watch surgery technology is going to go through the roof, while sports
Yeah,
technology
I know.
stays the
Yeah,
same to try to counterbalance
yeah. The sample size, they're getting more and more reps. These surgeons.
it. Yeah. All
All
right.
right. Well, everyone's tuned in. Like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate you, and we'll be back next week.
Yes, sir.